Hello there and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Defenders. For this particular episode, we are honored to have Her Excellency Frederieke Quispel joining us. You're most welcome, Your Excellency. I am Rita Kanya and I will be your host for this episode. Now, Her Excellency is the ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Uganda, and she's one of those who's very passionate about women and girls, and I believe you are most suited for a conversation about this today. We've started this conversation at the end of the 16 Days of Activism, but the conversation, as one was rightly put earlier on, was that it continues throughout the year. It's not just a 16-day situation. So we'll start with how the 16 Days of Activism have been for you as the entire embassy here in Uganda.
I think it's been really good to give a little focus, because I try to get women's rights and women and girls and their empowerment into every single activity that I do. But this 16 days has given an extra boost. It puts us all it puts our focus on the same spot, and that is a good thing. So it wakens us up, and I think it's great. It ends in Human Rights Week. Yeah. Give it extra awareness, and also to emphasize that women's rights are human rights, and that it's part of a larger package. And for me, very often, when there's pressure on women's rights, it's like the canary in the coal mine. All other rights will deteriorate as well. So it's very important to do this for women and girls, but it's even broader than that for me.
Yeah, and given that we have seen how the situation has evolved over the years when it comes to women and girls, where would you say the evolution has happened most, and in what direction has it taken?
Well, I think there's absolutely more awareness world over, I'd say, which is a good thing. But you also see a backlash. You also see people who feel that their rights are being infringed upon because women and girls are fighting for their rights. And that perspective is deeply, deeply wrong in my view. And I think therefore it's very important, because the women's movement was for the last since the 40s and since the 20s, I think, even the discussion, of course, in the US and Europe on women's voting rights was done by women who fought really hard and were very brave and suffered the consequences very often. But I think now it's time we have to make sure when we are having our discussions and when we're preparing our fight, we need to involve boys and men. And I had a discussion yesterday with members of the women's movement here in Uganda. And some said, no, we don't need the men. I think we do. I really think we do. Because it's not the girls, it's not women murdering women in the household. The perpetrators are often men. I remember speaking in this very room about gender-based violence, and then a man said, yeah, but there's also men being abused by women. I said, well, with these men you can maybe fill up this small room here. With the women that are being abused, you can fill up multiple buildings like these. And I think it's very important to give this information to everybody, to let men and boys know and help them understand the figures and what we're talking about, based on facts, based on research. So we are in the forefront, yes, and we will remain in the forefront as women and girls, but we need to include men and boys.
Yes, and when we talk about the men and boys, bring them into the fight, like you rightly put, they're also saying, but we are also being abused in one way or another. So how does it not become a blame game? What strategy would we best take on to have the boys and the men part of it and help them?
Make sure that's what we do here at the embassy. We make it part of everything we do. So we have large programs for smallholder farmers. And we begin working with smallholder farmers within the family. So it's the man, the woman, the children who sit together and discuss what their needs are, how they need to work together, they plan together. And even we don't necessarily discuss violence against women there, but just by working together as a family, violence against women diminishes.
Yes. And when you talk about it, it sort of goes to economic empowerment, the relation between poverty, justice, and also having that understanding that there's equality, so we can all do something together as a family, and no one is stepping on the other. Because a number of times it goes to what we are now seeing, the biggest number of cases of femicide. If a woman becomes empowered, there's also sometimes an increase in the cases of gender-based violence.
Yeah, and that is something that hurts me especially. There's one of my dear friends here, a Ugandan woman who told me that when she goes back to the village, her uncles expect her to sit on the floor, but she doesn't, because she says, "I paid for the furniture. I'm not sitting on the floor." So it shows you the power of that economic empowerment. But indeed, there's a backlash to that as well.
Yes.
So there also, I think, in Uganda, more than in the Netherlands, where we have a different setup. But here, of course, the cultural institutions are very strong. And I think we need not just empower women or inform women on their rights. We need to make sure that the entire community understands those rights and talks about those rights. And that's where, again, I think you need men. You need the cultural institutions. You need the kingdoms. You need they are the ones who have the influence to inform their communities and work with their communities. And I think especially I was informed that some of the queen mothers and queens play a very important role. For me, I discussed this today with the Minister of Gender. If we could help there, be supportive there, and use the energy that is there already, I think that would be great. And also I feel very often on these topics you hear people say, "Oh, but it's Western values, it's Western values." It's not at all. It's the Ugandan constitution that is actually, when it comes to female women empowerment, is stronger than the Netherlands constitution. And this constitution was worked into laws on inheritance, on children's rights, on all sorts of things. So the legal foundation is there, and it's purely Ugandan. And now we have to make sure that, first of all, women, and not just the women in Kampala, who are often quite aware of their rights and position, but the women in the countryside as well are aware of their rights. And also that the cultural leaders and the local councillors are aware of what is in the law. And most Ugandans, I know, are law-abiding citizens, absolutely. So for them to be, and it's a matter of communicating. So I think I really commend Uganda for having a really strong legal foundation for women, for the rights of women and girls. And now let's make sure that everybody is aware of their rights and aware of other people's rights.
Yes. And speaking of those rights, it also touches on the right for one to express themselves freely, not just in personal conversations, but also online, where now we see that gender-based violence has also taken another direction. A number of times you'll find that if a man came out to speak out about a number of things, they won't be stigmatized the way a woman is when she mentions a few things and comes up to fight for the rights of others. How are you seeing online gender-based violence taking shape?
Yeah, it's also something that people online dare to say things anonymously, which they would never dream of doing to somebody's face. The cowardice behind this is stunning. But yet many people take advantage of that anonymity to threaten and to abuse. And honestly, I really don't have the answer to that. I think I was recently reading something on you can either counter guns blazing what somebody's putting online, but apparently it's much better to engage in conversation. Draw somebody out and say, okay, so what do you mean exactly, instead of fighting back. But honestly, when I read those terrible comments, I do feel a strong tendency to fight back. But I think it would not be very diplomatic of me to respond. And responding anonymously is not in my nature. So, but I find it a big problem, also for female journalists. And I was told by a female editor-in-chief here in Kampala that newsrooms are more and more male-dominated because women are basically scared out of them, scared by harassment, by people respond more aggressively towards women than they would ever do towards a man. And I think that is a very sad conclusion. And we're definitely working with media. I'm also talking with this particular editor-in-chief, looking forward to be working with her. But I don't really have the answer yet. I hope that, as I said, we need data.
Yes.
And we need the scientific approach here. What works? And I'll be diving into that with my team. But I don't have the answers yet, I have to admit.
Okay. But would it also just go back to basic respect that we have seemed to just lose along the way?
Yeah, maybe it's a more individualistic approach to things. I don't know. I have to say, though, I do in real life encounter so many absolutely lovely people who are willing to engage, especially here in Uganda. I've only been here for a couple of months, but have not met a Ugandan without a good sense of humor and very approachable. So I think I don't know what the reasons are. I do know that the solution is in communication.
Yes, it is. Let's turn now to femicide. You were, the embassy as well, but throughout the 16 days of activism, took time to mention a thing or two about femicide, and you took your attention to femicide. We'd like to know why that was at the heart of your fight for the 16 days of activism.
Yeah, because I said 11 minutes in my clip of film on social media, but it's actually every 10 minutes a woman is being murdered. Every 10 minutes. So if you think about it, us just sitting here, as we speak, this is happening. And it's not happening by as a random act of violence in the streets, which is also terrible. It happens in her own home. So a woman very often is the least safe in her own home. And that is such a terrible thing. Also during the COVID pandemic, when women were everybody had to shelter at home, in a place where very many women are unsafe. If you just think about that, that is a terrible thing. And in the Netherlands, where I am from, every 8 days a woman is murdered. Every 8 days, almost every week, a woman perishes by the hands of her own partner or a brother. I mean, that in itself, how can you not fight against that, I'd say.
But where do we now turn the fight besides the men? Is it to the laws? Are they getting away with it?
I think that's also part of it. It's also very much in communications also, again. Like the Dutch media, when they report on femicide, very often they call it a family tragedy.
Oh, dear.
Especially when to add insult to injury, a child is involved as well. That is not a tragedy. No, it's a tragedy, but it's murder.
Yes.
It is murder.
Call it as it is.
Yeah, call it as it is. And a crime of passion. Oh, give me a break. That's not a crime of passion. That's a crime of hate. And it needs to be called that. And it needs to be punished like that. And it should not be an excuse. Whatever behavior, there's nothing a woman can do that in any way justifies violence against her.
I agree.
And we have to be open about that. So no crime passionnel and no family tragedy. Murder. That's what it is.
Now let's turn to you and your passion for women and girls just for a moment. Where did this start? Where was it awakened?
I think my mom, my grandmothers. I was posted to Canada, and I was a First Nation woman, an Indigenous woman, and she said, "I found it so beautiful." She said it so beautifully. I come from a long line of strong women, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, that is." It spoke to me. I think that is it for me. My mom, after she divorced my father, she studied law and became a lawyer. When she had 4 children, small children to raise. My grandmother also, after the Second World War, having spent time in a Japanese prison camp where she lost her daughter, my mom's sister, she went back to the Netherlands, left my grandfather and started working as a secretary. I have had, my grandmothers were a nurse and an artist who went to art school. My great-grandmother was also went to university. So I really come from a line of strong women.
Yes.
And I think it's just ingrained in me. Also slightly stubborn women. And my sisters also, they've worked all their lives and they will always remain to do so. So for me, it's there. I feel very blessed to be raised in the Netherlands, where of course we still have a fight to fight there as well. But you have as a girl, I never doubted that I would work and I would go to university. And here, when I hear that sometimes the Minister for Gender explained to me today that sometimes families don't even let the girl child go to school because it's not worth investing in her, because she won't bring anything to the family once she's married. Those things sadden me. And there also, I think, cultural institutions can play a large role to help reach the full potential of all these wonderful children that need their time in the sun, that need to be educated.
That's true. And for that woman human rights defender, because as you speak, I think of how strong your mother and your grandmother had to be that gave you the strength for you to be how strong you are today. So for every woman human rights defender out there who is in the middle of a fight, trying to fight for the rights of those in her community, it comes with immense stress, immense backlash, that sometimes it may get to a point where like, maybe I should give up. What would be your message to that woman who's fighting for the rights for other women and girls?
Find mentors and find girlfriends. In the Ministry of Foreign Affairs where I work, my best friends are all there. And we help each other, we support each other, we cry together if things go wrong, but we very often we stimulate each other to take that step, to apply for that job, and we root for one another. For me, good mentorship, really strong friendships are key and will help you in your fight. And also reach out that hand to the next generation. Yes. Don't forget that there were hands that pulled you up, and be that hand that pulls somebody else up as well.
Is there a story of a woman human rights defender that you have had that has stayed with you through the years, that sometimes you think about, and in the midst of everything, you're like, this is why you're part of the path that you're on?
Well, for me, they weren't necessarily women's rights defenders, but they were definitely strong women. My favorite story is I was, as a junior diplomat, I was posted to Rwanda. And I was in Goma for the peace negotiations that were going on. Can't even remember the date, but would it be 2006, something a while ago. And the negotiations were going on, and the men talked about access to the mines and who would own the weapons, etc. And then the mothers came in, dressed in their finest, looking absolutely gorgeous. And what did they talk about?
What?
How can we open up the road so my kids can go to school again? I want to go to my fields. I want to work my fields so I can earn some income again. And it was all about the children, all about the family. And the men were all about the mines, the weapons, etc. So then I saw it, even still to today, get goosebumps when I talk about it. I thought, well, that is it. Yes. That is what women do. And that's why they need to be part of peace negotiations. That's why they need to be part of any negotiation. That's what they do better than anybody. So for me, that was my moment to think, it's not just talk. It's actually, that proved to me that why women should have a louder voice.
Yes. Now, within the louder voice of any woman, we have talked about the cultural institutions, what they can do. We've talked about the men and the boys. Now let's turn to the civil society. What can they do? What more can they do? Because we know that in Uganda the presence is there. What more can they do? Or what do you think they can turn their eye to?
Work together. Work together. Strengthen one another. As you do individually with your girlfriends and your mentors, do that for one another. I know there's women organizations out there like Grassroots, and when they see a call for offers from an embassy like ours, it's almost impossible for them to adhere. Help them. And especially here in Kampala, there's a lot of talk, and which is great. It's a good thing. But also reach out, help others, and don't be in each other's way, but help each other. And okay, you don't have to agree on every single thing to still collaborate properly. Yes. So I think working together is key here.
It's very key. Yeah. Okay, our last question for you is your message to the woman, the girl, the woman human rights defender that's listening and watching this podcast. What would you like to tell them?
Ooh, that is a very good question. Well, to find strength in collaboration, it sounds so cliche, but you're not alone. You're not alone. I mean, 50% of the world population are women and girls. Work together, find a mentor, find somebody to support you. Do not give up, and don't let anybody tell you that you're not good enough, not smart enough, and that's not your place to do something. No, just and strengthen one another.
Thank you so much for joining us on Conversations with Defenders, Your Excellency. It has been a pleasure, and I hope that from the conversation we've had, there'll be a number of strong women and girls that will be taking on the fight.
I hope so too. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
The pleasure was ours. Thank you.